So what we're looking at is energy efficiency. So this ties back to our low carbon, clean and green, but this is about looking at projects that will help, you know, things like renewable energy, efficiency measures, insulation on houses. But what we're talking about is social housing here, and we're talking about people on low incomes, things like that. So it's about getting the most vulnerable in society into lower cost, kind of lower running cost houses, and help tackle things like fuel poverty. We can work with the private rental sector, but we'd be expecting them to act as effectively social landlords in that context. So that's the kind of first element of that. The second element is local green and blue spaces. So this is about creating for well-being, and good example here about the kind of green space the other side of these doors and at Newquay Orchard. What we're looking for here is projects that can create new and or improved green and blue spaces for communities which have less access to it, and also about nature recovery as well. So we want those projects that will also have positive impact on mental well-being. So is there areas in kind of certain communities that, you know, they could bring into, you know, abandoned land back into a community garden, community allotments, things like that, where the community will benefit. So yeah, the deadline, review point 1 deadline is 30th of May, and review point 2, which is the final deadline for this funding, is 24th of July. The budget, so the total available is 5.5 million, and the minimum award is 200,000, and maximum award 5.5 million. I think it's fair to say with this that we can often go up to 100% grant rate, particularly for community projects where there is market failure and it won't happen without that intervention. But equally, we are looking for, it will make your project stack up more if you can lever in either other public funding or other private match funding to help it. So for example, if you can get grants from elsewhere, or you can get, I don't know, private sector development funding, things like that, that would help, then that will help your project score better, because it is a very competitive process. As you can imagine, there's a lot of good applications and a lot of very worthwhile projects that do come in. So we have to kind of score and fund and put forward to the Economic Prosperity Board, which is the decision-making panel, the best projects with the highest chance of kind of delivery success. And as I've said, we've talked about what are we getting in return for those grant investments. What we're looking for is each of those funding streams has specific program outputs that we're looking to achieve and buy. So with this, there's two kind of objectives, outputs, and within that, there's target numbers that we're meant to achieve. That's for the whole program period. We don't expect each project, for example, to deliver 24 neighbourhood improvements, but we'd expect them to at least deliver one. And obviously, if a project delivers more than one thing, that will help with the value for money assessment and our scoring criteria when you submit your application. So now I'm going to move on to the Community Organisation Fund. And yeah, so Community Organisation Fund, there's revenue and capital here. And this is funding to support renovations, extensions, enhancements and adaptations of community facilities to make them more accessible. And that includes digital. So digital connectivity is very important, and that's a common theme through the programme, and user-friendly. So, you know, we've given an example of projects, but not limited. And I think the key thing is these funding streams are written quite broad, because what we're looking for is we don't want to stifle the kind of projects. So we're looking for innovative projects, and we're looking for yourselves to come forward to us with innovative projects that will cover a broad range, but be within the kind of spirit of what we're trying to achieve. So again, if people have got ideas, you know, not sure about whether they're eligible or not, then do talk to us at the end, or contact us through the Cornwall and Isles of Scilly Good Growth website. So yeah, projects could be memory wellbeing cafes, support for carers groups, warm food schemes, food banks, etc. I think the key point to say is, I know that the kind of economic landscape is tough at the moment. We can't, with our funding, do kind of continuation funding for people's salaries, ongoing kind of running costs of businesses. What we're looking for is additionality, is the big word. So what we're looking for is what will our funding help you do, which is new activity or bigger, better kind of enhanced activities than your core offering. So if you're thinking, right, you know, I'll just carry on with more of the same, I'm afraid that won't meet our criteria. It has to be kind of a new offer and deliver deliver those program outputs. So that's a key takeaway, just to manage expectations. So yeah, voluntary organisations, projects can be supported with their work to, you know, reach hard to reach groups in one place, and where support can be given to provide things like warm space, you know, other things are Meals on Wheels you might have. So, you know, we could fund kind of electric delivery vehicles that are part of your hub that then go and deliver Meals on Wheels to vulnerable members of the community. The list goes on and on. So there are lots of things that can either fit within this or will fit within the cost of living elements. So again, deadlines similar to what we talked about. Review point 1 is 30th of May, review point 2, 24th of July. Total amount available in this funding stream is 2.7 million. Minimum grant awards 200,000, maximum 800,000. And again, talked about intervention rates. So if you can bring in other funding, that de-risks the project for us because it shows other people are interested. It shows that they've also done their kind of financial due diligence on your project. They're happy with it. And it also helps with us. And it also shows that there's other people with kind of bought into that project. So for us, it gives us confidence that you're going to deliver a good project. So again, if you can bring in other funding sources, we welcome that. And then these are the outputs we're looking for the Community Organisation Fund. And all of this is on the website. So I know it's quite a lot to look at and digest in a relatively short space of time. So you'll find all these funding streams on the website, and there's initiation forms for each one. And that's what has these technical kind of output tables there. So do have a look at your leisure as well. So again, this is outputs we're looking for. So kind of number of organisations receiving grants. So, you know, that's 20, but effectively if you're one organisation applying, that would be an output of 1. So that kind of shows you what we're trying to achieve with this. You know, what I would say is when you're applying is look for realistic outputs that you can deliver, because they will become part of your contractual kind of obligation if you are successful. And then I'm going to hand over to Amanda to actually talk through the nuts and bolts of applying. Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you.
So that one's down, that one.
Thanks, James. So a few of you have recognised faces have attended before. We've got a lovely new infographic to try and make it easier to understand the process. So the first thing that you need to do if you're interested in applying to any of our opportunities is to go on our open opportunities page on the website, and they're all clearly listed. When you click through, you'll find a link to an initiation document, and that's where you can find the information that James talked about on the outputs and outcomes, the intervention rates, and everything else that we're looking for. You will then be able to complete an expression of interest inquiry form, which asks for the basic details of your project, including your total project cost, the amount of shared prosperity funding that you're requesting, your start and end dates, and exactly what you'll be using the funding for. That comes through to James and I, and we then assess that and decide whether you're a good fit, and we will send you the full application form, or we'll signpost you to alternative support, and that might be through the local growth hub, who can offer just generic business support to your project. And then we will ask you to submit your application before the deadline, and the deadlines are those review points that James talked about. Now, they aren't linked, so you don't submit some and then the rest. They are individual deadline points. So we'd expect you, if you're coming in at that earlier one, to be submitting a full project with all the supporting evidence, and then you'll receive feedback. And if you're missing some information, we might ask you to submit further information and come back into that further review point, or you might be unsuccessful or successful. Or you can just come in at the later review point. Once you've submitted your application, that's where James and I's support comes to an end, and it's handed over to our appraisal colleagues. They have the scoring criteria, and they'll go through and they will give you a score based on a point system. All of these are then handed over to our Economic Prosperity Board, who will decide which projects to approve. And then we enter a 10-day legal calling off period. And following that, we will then communicate decisions. It doesn't end there. If you're then successful, you'll go into a checks and clarification stage with the fund management team. They may ask you to provide a business case if it's a larger project. And this is where they'll just make sure that everything that you've put you're going to achieve within your outputs and outcomes that you're contracted against, and a funding agreement will be put in place. And then we can start to look at handing out the funds for projects. You might be wondering who can apply. Any organisation with legal status can receive funding. And if you have any queries around that, James and I can talk to you on a one-on-one basis. And startups are also eligible to apply for funding. We have recently changed our application form from an Excel format, which was quite tricky to navigate if you've been in the system before, to a hopefully easy to use Word document as well as an Excel annex. That Excel annex is now just for things like your cash flow and your outputs and outcomes, but hopefully it's a lot easier to navigate. And James and I have recently as well done some YouTube videos which talk through each section of both of the forms and describe exactly what information we're looking for within them. But if you have any issues at all, that's what we're here for, to help you navigate those as well and provide additional guidance. And then as well as those, at the end of an application form, you'll find a section on the supporting documents. And this is things like your procurement policy, your commitment to paying the real living wage. And these are easily forgotten. So I want to emphasise that these are just as important as the rest of the application. And we have gateway checks. And without those documents being attached, you could potentially fail those checks and not proceed to the next stage. So just pay particular attention to the supporting documents that are listed at the bottom of the application form. As well as James and I's support, we also have the application support section on our website. I want to point out in particular that form guidance, we recommend that you have this alongside the application form at the same time. It has the equivalent headings of what's in the actual form, and it talks you through exactly what we're looking for. So try and pull those up side by side, and also the FAQs is a really useful document to access for those basic questions. But anything additional, the Good Growth mailbox, James and I monitor that. We've now had Izzy, who started on Monday, joining our team, so we have even more capacity to support with the admin. So that is a great help. And you'll find all the other support documents on there as well as the YouTube videos, upcoming events. Yeah, there's some really great resource, and it is beneficial to take a look through, but let me know if you have any questions on it. And this is our email address, the central mailbox, the one front door. So James and I, what we can do is have 30 minutes Teams meetings with you, up to 4 hours of support. And we can, on those meetings, it's really up to you how you want to shape them. We can talk through your application form, we can answer questions. If you're pre-application stage, we can look at how your project might be able to fit into the windows. And then as we approach those review point deadlines, we are asking for around 15 to 10 working days. But if you submit an application ahead of that deadline, we'll then take a look through it and provide feedback for you just to make sure that you're not missing any documents. And that includes your procurement policy or any of other of those really important supporting documents. And then I'll leave this on the next slide as a question slide, but I'll leave this on here so you can write down the email. But I'll now hand it back over to the room for general questions. We answer any project specific questions if you want to come talk to us afterwards, but do we have any general questions?
Yeah. So big near the microphone.
Big near the microphone.
Yeah. Yeah. Should we take, lady in the black stripy top? Yeah.
Hiya, I just wanted to know what is the, once you've submitted your full application, what length of time is the appraisal process and how long does it take you to get a decision?
Yeah, so effectively, as Amanda said, project will come in, then it needs to be appraised, then it needs to go to the Economic Prosperity Board, then there's that 10-day cooling off period. So realistically, you're probably looking at kind of approximately 3 months. It depends for when you apply to actually being notified of a decision. That can change, and it's also subject, we don't know demand, so it depends how many applications come in, need to be appraised, and then that might mean that the Economic Prosperity Board date needs to be moved backwards so that the appraisal team can get through all the applications. But we try and do it generally within that kind of time frame. Yeah.
Because making a business case and writing a business plan, especially with other funding applications going on, is there a definite date that we will get money? You know, that, because I don't know where to start from. It's sort of important.
Yeah, so we pay grant in arrears. That's the normal process. So I think key thing to note is we normally pay 3 months in arrears. So you'd have to incur the expenditure, collate your claim, and then we will pay 3 months in arrears. We can, with community groups, do other things, but there'll have to be a strong rationale for doing that. So we could do monthly in arrears, but the challenge with that is it does sound good, but if there's any slippage, your monthly claim schedule then goes out the window, and it's hard to catch up and get back on top of it for cash flow purposes. So I think, you know, it's about being aware of all those kind of things. So we don't, we won't give kind of money up front, as it were. It is once you've incurred that expenditure, is the normal process.
That wasn't clear on.
I'll just add to that as well. If for the specific opportunity that you're coming in for, we can speak to the fund management team, look at when the economic prosperity date is, and then I can give you a rough guideline of when you should start your project cash flow from. So it's different for each one. They go into different ones. So we can have a chat or drop me an email. I'll give you dates, and then we'll look at the 10-day time frame and realistically come up with when we think decisions would be communicated. But just be aware, as Jane said, they can slide if we get lots of applications, but we'll communicate that clearly, and I'll be able to give you a rough guideline of when that should happen.
Yes, I've got 2 questions. First one relates, or both relates actually, to the tight deadlines by which your final application will be submitted. Obviously, for a capital project, to get through planning and all those sorts of things takes time. It could be that some projects are already partway through the process, but are now considering applying to this fund to make it happen, to help make it happen. Otherwise, it may not. To what degree can the development costs already incurred, not necessarily defrayed, but they've happened, those costs are there, in order to bring forward a fairly shovel-ready project that's going to hit your deadlines? To what degree can those development costs be included in the overall value of the project, but also as part of the claimable intervention of the grant?
Yeah, so we can do retrospective costs back to when the programme was launched, which was April 2022. Obviously, we need again, it's the rationale, the case for incurring those costs and why they should be part of your kind of project.
Right.
And obviously, again, it's fine to do that, but in a competitive backdrop, that will put the project cost up, value for money arguments, all those kind of things. So it's, you know, obviously the projects to decide what they, you know, what makes it work, but just be aware that they will impact those different
Some
areas.
of those things may not have been done under the procurement rules of the grant, for example.
Yeah, well, so that's the key thing, is that if people have gone, say you've gone to just one architect and you haven't openly procured that, so just for people's awareness, any cost will have had to follow the tendering and procurement guidance that we've got on the website. So that may be, depending on the grant amount, that may be that you need to get a minimum of 3 quotes, or you might have to go out to open tender. You will have needed to do that, otherwise those costs can't.
So that's my second question. Given the tight deadlines, the application windows, how will even a shovel project be able to get costed with a QS and then go out to tender to get the prices back in before the deadline? Can you put estimated costs in for the grant?
All good questions, yeah. So I think the first thing to say, the 31st of March 2025, that's a kind of target that was imposed by central government. We've tried as the accountable body for Cornwall and Isles Facility to see if there's any flexibility, and fortunately there's not, because we understand how hard it is. But for the app, I'm just working back from that. That's the first thing. But the application, you can do things in parallel, but that will impact on deliverability. So if I just explain a bit more about that, what you can apply to us with, like professional estimates rather than going out to full tender, so maybe quantity surveyor estimates, etc., with your cost, and then in parallel you can be getting those tenders and quotes while your application is going through our appraisal process. That's fine, but but we can't go higher than those costs. So if you then find, you know, your cost will be capped at whatever you've applied for. So if you then find that the actual tenders come in and it's a lot higher, then you'd have to find that shortfall yourself.
That's great.
And the same is true with planning permission, is again, you could apply, we need evidence that you're applying and in the process of planning, but you may not have had it granted, but that could be running in parallel. The only thing about all of these is deliverability of a project is a key assessment criteria. So there's one project that is shovel ready, as you say, and it's got all of that in place, and another project that is working through that. That project that's got it all in place is likely to score higher because it's a safer bet effectively for delivering than one that's still working through it. But that's not to mean, you know, if it's a great innovative project, it may score higher in other areas. So it's just about managing that.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah. I'd just like to comment on that because we've just been going through a process and it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation. That, you know, we were putting in a bid for a project and it hadn't yet been accepted. And so we found ourselves waiting for the bid to be accepted and actually I'll be on the building. And it caused some problems right at the end. We got right to the end of the process you've been describing, and very much at the last minute it failed because we didn't have the definite agreement on the purchase price. So that's just is a problem, I think. And I think in a way you have to just go ahead with, you know, as much as you possibly can do, and sometimes have a disappointment at the end. You know,
The obvious question is, although the 31st of March 2025 is the deadline for completely finishing your project and everything, is there any scope for any of the application deadlines to move to the right?
No. So not at the moment they're fixed, and the reason being is to allow them to be appraised because you need to be obviously approved, and then we need to have a legal agreement, which is a grant funding contract in place before you can kind of start work.
Yeah.
So if we move that to the right, then means it narrows that delivery window. So that's the challenge, and you know, I know it is really, and we're aware, you know, a number of projects talk to us about how tight it is, and I know it won't be for everyone, but unfortunately that's what we're kind of working with at the moment.
The second question, I don't usually have to ask this. When discussing it, how does this fit into the community area partnership, SPF funding? Is there a link to it?
Yeah, there is. So yeah, so obviously the scheme's quite big, and that's a good question. So I think, yeah, for most of the audience here and online, so there is, we haven't talked about it today, but there's the Community Levelling Up programme. So they normally deal with grants. So that's almost, it's part of SPF, but they'll deal with the smaller grants, and we're kind of like representing the mainstream part of the programme. So that's headed up by David Rodder and his team, and they normally do kind of grants for work that's over 25,000. And that's things like village halls, those kind of community projects, play areas, things like that. That's where they'd come in. So again, that's all on our website under funding opportunities and the contact details there. So do have a look. You may have a smaller project and you see that our minimum grants for a lot of this is 200k. So go to them. And then on the point of, we have community capacity facilitation fund, and this is links officers in geographic areas across Cornwall. And they can help you work up, if you're not at a kind of oven ready stage, they can help with feasibility studies, pulling studies together and help you with that kind of project writing, and they'll normally be able to do that up to 25,000.
So you are doing projects through CAPS as well?
Yeah.
So what was the limit you said?
It's only up to 25,000, but a lot of that's about actually, not necessarily projects, but about writing the strategies or the applications to then apply in, and that's headed up by Vanessa Luckwell. Again, that's all on our website if you want more details. Lady in the blue at the back.
So can you apply for more than one fund at a time?
Yeah, yes you can. So I think, yeah, so what people may do, understanding the time, is you may have different projects, or you might go, right, I'll come to us with, you know, all bells and whistles, bigger project, and then you might think I could do a smaller scale project and go maybe through the Community Levelling Up programme. So again, that's fine. We will check across them because obviously we can't double fund anything, but effectively you could do that, and people can apply to different funding streams, different projects. So yeah.
And the other question is, on our expression of interest, we give what I now know is an unrealistic deadline, because if we're not going to hear until August, to then get contractors in place and so on. So if our application comes in with a slightly different end date, but still within the March 25,
Yeah.
is that going to be okay?
That's fine, yeah. So those expressions of interest that come in, I'm mainly checking that you've not put a date after that March deadline. So at that point, we just want to see that you're eligible for the funding. But then once you get the application form, that's when you're really working out exactly what your timeframes are going to be. So yeah, don't worry if anything changes from the expression of interest, as long as it's not drastically different, that's fine.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the expression of interest is just a screening process for us to check that what you're doing is broadly eligible in principle, and which application forms to send you, because effectively the word application form Amanda's talked about is the same across all the funding streams, but the annex, the links to it, has different programme outputs we talked about, so we need to send you the right ones for your application. Right, so a number of hands, chat.
Sorry, on the level of match funding, just out of interest, is there a sort of tipping point where it's 40–50% either internal funding or by other grant funding measures to support it? Is there a point for you guys when you're reviewing the application? Is there a sort of a golden percentage that you're looking at to give us the maximum chance of getting it accepted?
That's always a difficult question. Again, it's on a case-by-case basis. The more kind of match funding from other sources you can bring in, then the value for money on what outputs you're delivering for us for the amount of grant, that kind of cost-benefit ratio will look better. But also, we don't want to stifle innovative projects, and we are talking here about kind of community, charity, voluntary sector. So, you know, you may need to do it with a very high grant rate. So again, that's for you to sell your project, why you need that grant rate, and that's all part of the application process. There's no hard and fast rule. Lady at the back, yeah.
Is it capital funding or is it revenue or both? And if it's both, is there a sort of weighting preference?
Yeah, so it changes from fund to fund, and on that initiation document, you'll be able to see the exact breakdown of what capital and revenue there is. So we can talk about what specific one is. I can show you the website afterwards, and then we can look at what the breakdown is for them specifically.
Is that per project or is that just for the overall fund?
It's for the overall fund, the breakdown, but I can look at what, as a project as well, we'd be expecting you to split it down to. There's like a little table within the initiation document that I can run through with you.
So, sorry to ask another question. Does that mean then that every project does have to be a bit of both?
For some funds, yes. So the capital and revenue one that James flagged earlier, we'd be expecting to see a capital and revenue element. I think that was for the community organisation fund, and that's showing that we are expecting some kind of renovation work or extension work. So it can't just be staff wages or any activity based. Yeah, that one does have a capital requirement. That's okay.
Right, are there any other hands? Yeah.
I think I read somewhere about ownership of community building alongside principal user of that building. Can a user of that building apply for the capital project?
Yeah, that's a good point. So again, kind of, we need to contract with a legal entity. So they need to be a recognised legal, whether it's a community interest company, a limited company, whatever. It needs to be a recognised legal body that we can contract with. If it's the user, we would need the landlord's or the owner's permission of the building. So effectively, especially if you're going to be doing kind of capital works, modifications, that they agree with that and also understand effectively what the lease term is. Because if we're going to put a lot of grant funding into a project, we'd expect it for a number of years to still be used for that purpose.
There is a section on that in the application form. It asks if you're the owner or the leaseholder, and then it asks you to write about the consents that you've got in place. And then we'd just ask you to attach those as supporting documents as evidence that it's been agreed.
Yeah, just looking at the sort of point system, that it seems to be integral. There's a very high point system for training. And I didn't understand from this whether that's for both of the funds you mentioned today. But for example, you've got a number of people attending training systems. It's got to be really high. Is that a very important part?
That's the outputs and outcomes, isn't
Yeah.
it? So that would be across all the projects that apply. We'd be looking for that number of people to be supported across every single project. So
About 500.
Which one is this for? Is this
Oh,
for,
I see, for the entire.
for the entire
Funding
money.
for the
Yes.
funding stream? Yeah.
So we'd expect a number, so we'd
Really
expect a
busy.
number. Yeah.
No, so if it's a 5 million pot, that will be allocated across so many projects, and then within that, we'd be looking for that many people to be supported to make sure that we're meeting our
Yeah.
agreement.
Not as having to set up a college.
No, don't worry.
Okay.
Are there any more questions? We can move into networking and tea and coffee. One last thing.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I might have missed it, but with the review point, is that to allocate sort of part of the funds at one review point and then the other part at the second point?
Yeah, so I think that's a,
So two deadlines.
yeah, there is. So there's, so yeah, no, I think that is a good point. So effectively, what the Economic Prosperity Board have decided to do is if there's good projects that come in under review point 1, and therefore the funding, they may allocate all the funding there if they're good projects, and there may not be a review point 2.
Yeah.
The reason I think they're thinking behind this is just that there's such a short delivery time scale that if they held some back for review point 2, and it's large capital projects, they might not be able to deliver by the 31st of March 2025. So our advice is aim for the first review point,
Yeah.
but we do need a complete application. So that's the caveat to that. So if you come in and you haven't got planning permission applied for, or even in the process of it, you're unlikely to kind of be successful. So just to manage expectations, and I know it is quite challenging, but that's why we're here in, you know, at the front end of the process to work with you and give you that advice and guidance.
Thank you very much.
Can I just ask, has there been a review point before, or are we the first?
You're all the first cohort of this. This is for these 2 that we're talking about today. So this is you. So yeah, so effectively all the projects that come in at review point 1, that'll be the first time this funding element.
Some are on their 3rd and going into their 4th, so it changes across. So just make sure when you click on the opportunity on the website, it will tell you the specific review points, and then going back to my previous point, I can then let you know when it's going to the Prosperity Board and when the outcome's likely to happen. It's a big jigsaw.
It is, isn't it? Thank you.
Any other bits?
Just one last
Yeah.
one. Do you provide advice, or is there, obviously some people have green, but some people don't, for all that extra additional funding? Is there someone within Cornwall Council's team that helps with that extra sort of opportunities? Or is that down to me?
Yeah, we normally look for the projects to do that. So I think, yeah, what we're looking for is the projects to have had those conversations, discussions, and come in and say, right, we've already agreed that they'll match fund 5, 10, 15%, whatever it may be. So that, or a number of sources to do that. And I think the other thing as well is looking for kind of partnerships, collaboration. We'll obviously contract with one kind of key legal entity, but there's nothing to stop people working together. Collaborative projects is great, you know, bigger than the sum of the parts and all that. So if people around, you know, that's another reason why we hold these events, because often people get talking during the networking, actually work out they're doing very similar things. Let's actually put a joint, you know, application in with one lead partner acting on it. So again, that might help, or it will help you kind of deliver more for less effectively in terms of what you can with the funding available.
It's definitely worth speaking to the Growth Hub as well, because they are a signposting support service, and they'll have the wider knowledge of all the current live opportunities, and also be able to signpost you to support events and webinars and things like that, and other support providers in the region. So a lot of people get confused. We're the Good Growth Fund, and the Growth Hub is a completely separate business support entity that's going to be delivering some of our funding for us. So I'll help you navigate to both websites. If you need any links, I can send them in an email.